At issue this week, a rideshare tax to help pay for Philly's public schools. The mayor revises her budget proposal, increasing that tax proposal. We'll analyze the impact it could have on education and commuters.
NBC10 at Issue starts now.
I'm Lauren Mayk. Welcome to NBC10 at Issue. Less than 2 weeks after announcing a rideshare tax to help pay for Philadelphia schools, Mayor Sherrell Parker now making a change. During her budget address on March 12th, the mayor talked about adding a 20-cent fee to every Uber and Lyft rideshare rides. Now she wants to increase that to $1 per ride. The mayor says that increase will bring in $48 million each year for the school district.
This infusion of new revenue, it will stop the elimination of jobs and the jeopardizing of our children's progress.
Here now to discuss the mayor's budget proposal, we are joined by Donna Cooper. She's the executive director of Children First, an organization that advocates for kids. Pat Loeb is a reporter for KYW News Radio who covers City Hall. And Reverend Sean James is the pastor at Salt and Light Church and is a member of Power Interfaith. Thank you all for joining us. Great to see you.
Great to be here.
So let's start with something that happened after the initial budget address, but that has been getting a lot of attention, and that's the mayor's proposal for a rideshare tax with the money going to schools. Initially, it was 20 cents per ride. She boosted that to $1. Donna, I'll start with you because you were at the event where the mayor made this announcement of increasing this tax proposal. You were there, you spoke at this event. Why do you think that this is worth it?
Well, when you think about it, the school district was at risk of laying off 340 staff. And, you know, we have 220 buildings. So anywhere kids were going to school, they were likely to lose a teacher, a climate change manager, a climate manager, a associate superintendent, a principal. So they were going to lose somebody. And our schools are already staffed too thin. And so the experience of children in the schools is so dire that it seems to me we have to pick up every cushion and find the money that we can. And other cities have advanced and succeeded in getting rideshare taxes passed. So, you know, it seems to me the mayor made a very sound proposal that would generate money that would save most of those positions from being eliminated. We need to do more than what the mayor proposed, but at a minimum, taking the resources from Rideshare, the company, and putting that into the schools. Look, these companies depend on a vibrant economy, and a vibrant economy depends on great kids graduating from great schools. So I think it's a really sound proposal.
Now, I know that the mayor and the city have said, hey, these companies can absorb this, but Uber has already said it'll be passing this on to riders. So, you know, the question, there's an affordability question that comes to mind. And Pastor James, I wanted to ask you about this because I know Power has really focused on affordability, had a report out about affordability recently. What is your take on this proposed tax and how it would impact people?
Yeah, so fully funding the schools is extremely important and has been an issue in Philadelphia for a very long time. A growing issue considering the ways in which both state and federal funding in all places across the city is decreasing. I think that we need to consider not just the rideshare and the other ways of funding the schools, but the ways in which we continue to decrease the tax burden on businesses and increase the tax burden on individuals. So the repeal of the BERT tax and other similar taxes, I think, are putting us in a position where it seems like every year we're asking people, property taxes, sugary drink taxes, however you want to look at it, to do more while we're asking businesses to do less. So fully funding the schools is absolutely important to me. And the mayor, of course, has to be creative in the ways of doing this. I think as someone who really speaks out for the citizens of Philadelphia, people want to know why is that burden consistently coming more on our shoulders while we decrease the burden on businesses in the city. And of course, the mayor has the responsibility to make sure that businesses stay in Philadelphia, but we also have to think about the people and find a balanced way to fully fund and support our schools, but also make sure that the majority of that burden is not put on people who are already struggling to make ends meet in Philadelphia.
When it comes to figuring out that balance, Pat, ultimately that gets figured out at City Hall and by the council, who they're now responsible for taking a look at what's been proposed and figuring out what gets passed. What are you hearing in City Hall about how that tax is being received, along with some other tax proposals, and where it might land?
Right. There was definitely pushback at this past week's budget hearings against the Uber fee, but also against the 25-cent per order delivery fee for pothole repair. And even the 2% hotel tax increase got a little bit of pushback in council. So I doubt that this package is going to pass as introduced by the mayor, even as amended by the mayor to hit that $1 amount, because these are regressive taxes. These are basically user fees, and that is a regressive way to raise money. And city council, it tends to be a progressive body, and I don't think they do want to put the burden on everyday Philadelphians.
There's much more to our conversation with the panel. We'll talk Philly's soda tax and more. You can hear that on a new episode of Battleground Politics, available on NBC10.com and wherever you get your podcasts.
From City Hall to the state capitol, there is also a budget fight happening in Harrisburg. I'm speaking to two key players, one from each political party, coming up on this edition of NBC10 at Issue. Stay with us.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Welcome back to NBC10 at Issue. Before the break, we discussed the debate over the proposed budget for the city of Philadelphia, but there is also a budget debate going on in the state capitol, one that affects everyone living in Pennsylvania. So for more on that, we welcome to the studio the Speaker of the State House of Representatives, Democrat Joanna McClinton. Madam Speaker, great to see you.
Always good to see you, Lauren.
So let's talk about where things are with the budget. The governor introduced his budget. I know recently the chair of the Appropriations Committee introduced essentially that same budget into the House. But tell me about negotiations this year, because the budget was late last year. Can you point to anything that tells you that it's going to be different this year?
Well, the first thing I can say is Governor Shapiro, on the same day that he made his budget address, convened a meeting with the top legislative leaders from the State House and from the State Senate. And the message was clear. We look forward to having meaningful compromises and an on-time budget, getting all of the differences aside, figuring out what our concessions will be, and making sure that the people of Pennsylvania don't have to wait, because it's been late 3 years in a row, some of it by design, others of it by politics. But regardless of what anybody's issue was in the past, we're starting this budget fresh and new, looking forward to real compromise and change. And as you said, State Rep Jordan Harris just introduced the budget bill in the State House. It'll be moving through his committee when we return to vote in the month of April, and from the committee to the floor and sending it over to the Senate.
Last year, we spent a lot of time talking about SEPTA and transit money, and it was a real priority for you and for Democrats and some Republicans in Harrisburg. It did not happen in the way that you had hoped it would, and the proposal is not the same this year. But does it mean that you are approaching this any differently, given that you didn't get one of the very big things you were looking for last year?
Without a doubt, it's a non-negotiable for us. It remains at the top of our priority list, but we are one chamber. So the fact that over 3 years we sent 5 different ways for our state Senate to consider funding transit, yet they moved on none of them, means we have to try a new approach. We have to figure it out a little bit differently. We can't just keep sending the same types of bills over to them. We can have a larger conversation about funding transit and roads and bridges, because that's a lot of the feedback we got from our colleagues in the Senate and Republican districts who say, oh, what about my bridges? What about my roads? They need to be repaired. They need to be invested in. That's all fine and good, but we have to talk about both issues, because the same way people in and around our city are going both places to the suburbs or wherever they might have to work, where people have to go to school and get to the doctor. They also need roads and bridges that are safe in rural Pennsylvania. 75% of our state is in fact rural. 3 million people live in those very loosely populated areas, but they also need services. So we look forward this budget season to really getting to compromise, getting to yes, and putting it all behind us.
So maybe less of that sort of hot potato, like, okay, now it's yours. We passed something. Oh no, we passed something, kind of thing.
Well, we do have to ramp up the pressure. One thing we've seen from the state Senate is they're reluctant to take leadership and action. They don't send us too many budget proposals. They don't send us any transit or roads and bridges proposals. They don't send us many solutions. So we have to do a little bit of hot potato because they have to know the public is watching. And big shout out to everyone who protested, who wrote, who called offices, who showed up in Harrisburg, that did a lot of work to make sure that we fund transit. We still need your voices in this fight this year.
So there are some potential pots of new revenue that we are still talking about the possibility of marijuana legalization and the revenue that could come from that, from skill games regulation and the money that could come from that. Those are in the governor's budget right now. If they don't go through, just like they didn't go through last year, how would things change? Where would you make cuts?
So the truth of the matter is that we are seeing everything in this economy going up. So when we start talking about making cuts, what do you cut? Funding education, because we've been decades behind in fairly funding every school? Or is it the little bit of human services that goes a long way to give people aids in their homes and things like that? We're not at the ability where we can make cuts. So we must figure out creating new revenue, looking to use some of the money in our rainy day fund, which is at $7 billion. Not all of it, not a max amount, but some of it so that we can wisely invest. And yes, it's time for us to figure out new ways to make money, whether that's marijuana legalization, finally regulating skill games, which are all over in small businesses, in taverns, in gas stations, making sure that they're not making lots and lots and lots of money, yet the state is currently getting $0 in revenue.
I wanted to also talk to you about something that happened in the State House this past week, because it is Women's History Month, and you swore in some new members, two new women in the House that will raise the number of women serving in the House to 65, to a level that you haven't seen before. And Pennsylvania has really, the numbers have really increased in Pennsylvania over the years. It was like 38, I think, a decade ago, and now you're at 65. What does that say to you?
Oh, it's amazing. When I think about the fact that I've been in Harrisburg in the State House for almost 11 years, and there were 40 when I was elected in 2015. I brought 3 with me. We are seeing exponential growth, and it changes the outcomes for people, because when women are at the table, when we're in leadership, when we're representing our communities, we bring all of the issues that are important to us. Women's health care. The first bill that I called up as speaker was Senator Kim Ward's bill to make sure there are free mammograms and diagnostic testings for those who have a history of breast cancer in their family. When we think about the Pennsylvania Black Maternal Health Caucus, created by State Rep Morgan Cephas, Latasha Mays, Gina Curry, some of them right here, one of them in Pittsburgh. They're working hard to make sure that all moms have safer environments in which they can start their families and grow their families. So women being at the table make a huge difference. We just were able to get the Crown Act passed. That's because of advocacy of women in the legislature. So not only do we see our agenda changing, but we see folks stepping up and being relentless and working across the aisle to get things to our governor's desk.
You also, though, are losing one of your representatives, a Republican from Butler, who just announced that she was losing. And she talked about family when she announced her resignation and the need for sort of a more family-friendly capital. What did you make of that? And what are you going to do about it as Speaker?
Well, one of the things that I already have done about it by being the leader of the Pennsylvania House Democratic Caucus, when I learned that we didn't have appropriate maternal leave for our staff, I changed that immediately because I'm like, oh, so people only get these few days when they need the opportunity to bond with their new baby or their newly adopted child, no matter what, mom, dad, whomever. I changed that policy immediately. One of the first things I did as speaker was make sure that there is not workplace harassment that can't be reported against state representatives. I changed our House rules. And listening to my colleague from Butler talk about how she needs time right now to focus on her family, it makes me reminded that whether it's my goddaughter or my mom, for which I'm a caregiver, or my brother, we all have to figure out how to balance everything and support people where they are. And so if that means making the Capitol more family friendly, we're going to make every effort to see what's necessary so that our staff, because remember, we don't just have moms that are state representatives, but we have staff that are mothers and aunts and so on and so forth. What's necessary so that in 2026, the most modern time that we've been in yet, that we have all the support so that people can thrive. But I do understand that in many professions, people have to recognize this isn't a good time right now. So it's a very difficult sacrifice each and every day, whether you're showing up or even making a tough decision to say, I need to take a break and focus on home.
All right, well, we'll continue to watch how things progress in Pennsylvania. Speaker Joanna McClinton, thanks so much for your time. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Straight ahead, we'll get the view on the state budget from the other side of the aisle. When we come back, my interview with one of the top Republican leaders in the state Senate. Don't go away.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Welcome back to NBC10 at Issue. Before the break, we brought you my interview with Pennsylvania House Speaker Joanna McClinton, a Democrat. Let's check in now with the Senate side to see where the budget issues stand. We'll bring in Republican State Senator Scott Martin. He represents parts of Berks and Lancaster counties. He is also the state Senate's Appropriations Committee chair, so he knows a lot about the budget. Senator Martin, great to see you.
Great to be back with you, Lauren.
You know, the bottom line, first of all, for folks is this budget going to be done on time? It was quite late last year.
Well, I really think that's what dependent upon what the sides come to agreement on in terms of a reasonable budget. Every year I feel like my team is being the same thing, kind of warning about where we were going in terms of the structural deficit and the danger to the rainy day fund and the looming, major tax increases if we didn't get the rate of spending growth more in line with revenue growth. Of course, now we're looking at a proposal that is 5.4% more. And right now, the governor's budget would take $4.6 billion out of the rainy day fund, which is a one-time source of money. And that's if he gets recreational marijuana and gains a skill. And if he doesn't, then you're looking at taking closer to $7 billion, almost the entirety of the rainy day fund. And what that would mean, given the fact that there is no more runway, there is no more fund balance, is that it would have a hole so massive that you're talking about very massive tax increases next year, guaranteed. So coming to a reasonable budget conclusion that tries to rein in the rate of spend versus what the revenue growths are just absolutely critically different or critically important. And mind you, if anyone was paying attention, in December, the Commonwealth did a refinancing of some debt, and actually our outlook was moved down from positive to stable, which is a kind of a first step that they do. And they gave a lot of warnings about how we need to get this structural deficit under control. And of course, you heard the governor tout a lot of benefits of having a rainy day fund, the positive outlook, paying less for debt, things like that. But now they're looking to unwind that completely. So to answer your question directly, the goal is always, we were preparing and getting things together for this year's budget, probably even before the last one was done. But what it's going to take is going to take some fiscal responsibility in this budget in order to prevent the Commonwealth at a time where it needs to be more competitive than ever, and at a time when people are really still struggling with inflationary costs, and of course where the prices of gas are right now, that do you want to turn around and you think it's going to help our competitiveness to raise taxes on Pennsylvanians? I would say no to that. So what are we going to do to prevent that from happening and still provide the necessary services we need to provide?
You mentioned the the potential of new revenue. I wanted to ask you about this. It's something that had been discussed before, and with the potential for money from skill games and marijuana. And you specifically said if the governor gets it, but that money would be going to Pennsylvania. What are the chances that you can come to a deal on one or both of those things to bring in that new revenue that could pay for some more stuff?
Well, I want to say a couple things on this topic. One is until people can look me dead in the face and talk about having the tools necessary to deal with the increased DUIs that other states see related to marijuana usage, until people can talk to me about what's the regulatory framework, about how long THC has to be out of your system before you drive a school bus full of little kids or operate a forklift, and its impact on workplace insurance rates. And no one ever does. Everyone wants to jump right into the pool, or to explain why states end up spending more than every dollar they take in whenever they legalize it. So I'm not one that thinks that's the direction we should be going. However, the games of skill issue, I think, is one that I'm hopeful that can come to some sort of an agreement on. You know, the governor wants the tax rate to be 52%. You have another faction that wants the tax rate to be 16%, and you have one that wants to take a middle approach. And through all that smoke, I will tell you, no pun intended, is that we also have a Commonwealth Court decision that ruled that these games are not gambling, and it's currently been on appeal in front of the Supreme Court, which I was hopeful they would soon make a ruling on. Because quite frankly, we could be in a position where we actually do come to an agreement and it immediately gets taken to court, which it will under the current Commonwealth Court ruling. So we'll see. I think that one has a better chance than the other.
Senator Martin also argued the projected revenue from skill games and marijuana is overly inflated and wouldn't cover Pennsylvania's structural deficit. We'll be right back.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Do you know a local organization working to make a difference in our community? NBC10 and Telemundo 62 are teaming up to make a positive impact with local impact grants powered by Comcast NBC Universal. Local impact grants give money to local nonprofits tackling everyday problems. Learn more about the program and submit your entry at NBC10.com/local impact grants. You can also scan the QR code on your screen. Applications must be received by April 24th. That does it for this edition of NBC10 at Issue. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.